everybody, and welcome to Economics with the Honorable David M. Walker. I'm Nick Palavita. I'll be your host and moderator today for our very exciting topic, which will be education. And with that, there's a very important document never shown on national or international television, and for the first time that I noticed. As a matter of fact, it took me years before I found that this was even done. It's the PISA results, okay, by the Organization of Economic and Cooperative Development. Now, we have a special guest who will probably introduce us to these PISA results, but this is basically the assessment of reading, math, etc., around the world. In other words, how do Americans score in terms of basic studies K through 12 around the world? And so we're going to look at the PISA and the results that they have. It's a very interesting study. I pulled the 2018 study, and the sad part, as you go through that, you do find the United States here as a competitor. We're like not even in the top 20 in terms of the education results. So with that, we're going to bring in our panel to analyze the PISA results and figure out why aren't we scoring well against the rest of the United States. So first of all, we're going to bring in a person who's a member of the Mega Society, which is the top IQ 1 out of a million scores in the country. And that is Rick Rosner. Rick, welcome to the show. I'm sure PISA will be interesting for you to look at, a piece of pizza, especially the scores that you see the Americans put relative to the world. And then also this is like hidden from America. I mean, it's like we don't even want to discuss it because the United States, the winners are poor China, but definitely not the United States of America. With that, we have somebody from the education department who actually is a former professor at State University of New York and Albany, and a writer of a very famous book called The Millionaire Next Door and Richer Than a Millionaire. So we're going to bring in Bill Denko, and you're probably familiar with this study, I would say, right, Bill?
Well, the basic content of it, but not the excruciating detail.
Oh, not the excruciating detail. Well, the thing is that the detail, so you taught at the college level, okay? PISA is for the K through 12 level. Mm-hmm. And it's like the scores for math, reading, science around the world. And it's done, by the OECD. And what happens, though, the astonishing result is the United States doesn't do very well in the PISA results. And we want to know why our kids aren't learning. And also we'll bring in Sasha Starr from Canada. In other words, may be able to weigh in on this. But this document is like hidden from the world. Of course, Mark Lee is going to join us from Durham, North Carolina.
Yeah, I joined, and that was the reason I joined. Nick, as you know, one of the companies that I work for when I'm not doing stuff at the Cultural Arts Center is a company that is actually in the testing business. It's actually one of the leading testers in the country, and I think that is part of the problem, is that we grade to the test or we teach to the test. And definitely there is a major company here in North Carolina. Actually, there are a couple of companies here in North Carolina that will talk to you about that, is how we grade to the grade to the exam or teach to the exam. Sure. So the kids are actually learning the exam and not necessarily learning the material. So I don't know if Bill's got any thoughts, because that is a conversation that has been going on in education for a number of years. And like I said, without naming the company, I may name it later, but it is very much known in the grading circles and all along those lines. But it is definitely one of the leaders, and even they will admit that a lot of times the teachers, and they have to meet with the teachers, are being the students are being taught to the test. So a lot of times it's not about developing critical thinking or developing the ability to actually have a coherent argument and all along those lines. It is trying to make sure that you are meeting the standards that they want you to meet. That's part of the whole conversation around Common Core and all in that space. And I think Common Core has been supported by both of those on the Republican and the Democratic side. And I think that there are some issues around Common Core, and even the way that Common Core is now even tied into the AI conversation as well. Because part of the reason I still have a job with that company is because of the fact that they feel that AI can't, while it can grade effectively and grade very effectively, that it can make errors and that it may not understand human nuances. So they have to have us humans do cross-check, for lack of a better term, and all along those lines. But Bill, any thoughts about this nature of education? You wrote that great book, The Millionaire Next Door, and everything. But I do know that a number of folks, and I've had folks in my family that have been teachers, including some that have passed on, they will tell you that that is their frustration, is that we are too busy teaching to the test. That was the expression I was looking for, and not necessarily getting folks to have a understanding of what they are learning. But Bill, any thoughts?
Well, yeah, that I would like you, Nick. You said you have the 2018 edition of this report.
Yeah.
I would like to see what it was like in the year 2000 or 1990 if they did collect data such as this. I mean, what I suspect is there's a downward trend for the United States. And I can look at this, being at the, professor at a university, since like 1980, to the early part of this century. The two things are happening. Either I was younger then, and maybe the students were brighter, or maybe as I got older, I didn't understand why the students were less able in towards the end of my career. So I think empirically, from my observation, students are less prepared, and most of my students were from the United States. So I can, anecdotally, I can say that these results are probably true.
Hey,
and then on the other hand,
just really quick, that's all. Shaquille joined us. Do y'all have a lot of that thing that I alluded to? Because I do not know the Australian education system the way that you would and everything. But is there a lot of teaching to the test? Because that is one of the main complaints that exists here. I can tell you that teacher friends of mine, whether they are union teachers or non-union teachers, are very much frustrated by this notion. And I don't know if it's a global problem or if it's just something that is more Western based.
You don't have any problems, Mark, in the United States that the rest of the world doesn't have. The rest of the Western world has the same problems as you guys. I know that upsets you because you guys think you're unique, but we actually have the same issues. And I can tell you that when we are teaching our kids to focus on all sorts of other issues, and we're not teaching them to focus on their grades, they get left behind. And if they happen to be unfortunate enough to be like myself, I won't tell you what my IQ is. I'm not going to in any way compete or compare myself to Rick Rosner. But if they are unfortunate enough in any way to have a high IQ and to be an academic outperformer, there is a significantly higher chance of them dropping out of school than there is of them completing it. Because our school system sucks. Our school system sucks. It makes bright kids get so frustrated and bored that they drop out. And our school system sucks because it has the lowest percentile of kids that also get so frustrated that can't keep up, that also drop out. And the way to fix that, in my opinion, is to make sure that we change the school system, that parents have more of a choice. But that's never going to happen when you have a top-down approach to education.
Hey,
sorry, Rick.
Shaquille, along those same lines, North Carolina used to really pride itself on vocational learning and trade and a number of things around that area. And there are still some schools that are doing quite well in that. But I do know that there are some folks that are seeing the vocations and the trades leave in our school systems. And this is also frustrating some of my parent friends and everything. So I was wondering, is that an issue in Australia and around the world? Because you are a world traveler and everything. Because I think that we don't give enough respect. And as you know, and I know, there are some people that are plumbers and brick masons and a number of other folks that can make some pretty good money, maybe as much money as the doctors, lawyers, and Indian chiefs.
Of course, but it's the same issue. In my personal opinion, and certain people within the finance industry disagree with me on this, and that's fine. But in my personal opinion, you've only got to listen to the criticism of the education system that is put forth by so-called conservatives. What do they say? We want our children, and this is the only point of the education system, we want our children to be productive members of society. And this especially comes from immigrant parents like mine were, right? They come into Western country, they say, get an education. If you get a good education, you'll get a good job. And if you get a good job, you'll have a nice life. And they're correct. They're right. Anybody can do that. That's fine. The problem is I don't want to work for somebody else. I don't want to be a good little boy. I don't want to be productive for society. I want to look after me. Okay? And society can do what it wants to do. If I've got to pay some taxes to help society get along, that's fine. But I'm not here to live my life in servitude to society. That's exactly the reason why I became a finance trader in the first place. That's exactly the reason why I live my life the way I do, because when I was told off in primary school for being too rebellious and not respecting authority, through my teenage years, my early 20s, I thought, yeah, maybe they're right. Maybe I should respect authority more. But now that I'm a bit older, to hell with authority. Who the hell are they? Why do they have authority? So this is the problem that we have with the school system. We are institutionalizing our children from their earliest ages. They go to school, the bell rings. Between that bell and the next bell, you've got to work on your schoolwork, whatever else it is. Then you have a break. The bell rings, you've got a break. Then you have another bell, now you go back to school. Then you have a bell and you've got to go to lunch, right? Very regimented, very much like you're working in a factory. To hell with that. That's not how education was working a few hundred years ago, and we did pretty well back then. I will not comply, and I will certainly make sure that my children, if I'm ever blessed with them, will not comply. Rick.
All right, so one among many challenges right now is that one of our major political parties is anti-public education and anti-science. And that's on top of kids, extreme distractibility now, because there's so much awesome stuff that you get from the box in your hand, and that you can go to Google and get the answer to anything within a half second. And I've lost the ability. I used to read 5 books a week. Now I'm lucky to get through a book a month because I'm always looking at stuff on Twitter. But we need a push for public education, and we need the Republicans to quit pushing against it.
Rick, you're intelligent enough a person, an old enough a person, to make your own choices. If you think Twitter's a problem, get off it and go to your library if you think you should be reading more books. But I want to make a bigger point. When I was growing up, I went to a Christian school many Christian schools as I was growing up. Richard Dawkins came out with this sort of, not anti-intelligent design sort of thing, Darwinism. And he targeted children. And I watched those, much to the ire of my school teachers at Christian schools. But I watched it anyway. But it was allowed to happen. Now we have the reverse. Now we have science, as you've called it, so-called science, that we know for the last at least 20 or 30 years has been politicized. We know that you can't get grants for certain types of studies. You can only get grants for certain studies that comply with a particular political view. And the science has been slanted. And you point that out, and you're called some sort of radical right-wing extremist. If we really believe in science, I'll ask the same question I asked a handful of weeks ago. We know, for example, that testosterone levels in men and women and certain animals has declined precipitously over the last 30 years. Should we do a study on that? Should we try to work out whether that might have an effect on something and what the possible solutions are? Well, we could, but unfortunately can't, because the politics says testosterone leads to toxic masculinity. So when people want to sit there and lecture conservatives, which I am not, but if people want to sit there and lecture conservatives about following the science, yeah, I'll follow the science when the science is fair. Also, I'll follow the science when I can read both sides of the argument, even arguments that I don't agree with. Richard Dawkins, for example, there was a study done where the question was asked, we breed horses and greyhounds and other animals based on their genetic traits to build or to breed stronger animals. So would it not make sense that we could do that with humans? Now, obviously, we don't want to go down that path as a species. We don't want to go down that path, especially after what happened in Germany. We don't want to go down that path. But the question of would it work is a different question to the ethical question of should we do it? Those are two different questions. And Richard Dawkins wouldn't even entertain the question and actually attacked another scientist after telling me when I was 9 years old that he would always follow the science. He took a political position. So I grant what you're saying. Yes, those Republicans that went for creative, intelligent design instead of Darwinism, fair enough that there was some criticism of that. But parents surely should be able to influence how their kids are going to think and feel and what sort of education they're going to get.
I'd bet that more than 99% of papers in the hard sciences, physics, chemistry, much of biology, don't have any political slant. I mean, you can talk about the soft, you can talk about sociology and poli-sci. Obviously, all that stuff's going to have plenty of slant. But in the hard sciences, there's going to be very little. All right, you get into climate change and stuff, and the Republicans are going to fight studies of that. But
all right, Rick, I'll make you a deal. I don't know what you can afford, what you can't. I'll just put a number out there. You said you'd bet on it. All right, I'll bet you 100 grand. I'll be in the United States in the next month or the month after. I'll bet you 100 grand. You name 5 universities. Name 5 universities in the United States. We will read the papers. We'll give you the last 10 years. So we're not going to talk about the recent stuff. Give you the last 10 years. We'll you and I together, we'll pick the studies. I'll give you first choice across the studies. I'll bet you $100,000 that the studies will be politically slanted.
Hey,
You have a bet?
I can.
No, Mark. No. I've put a proposition to Rick. 100 grand. If you can't afford 100 grand, we'll go with 10 grand. If you can afford that, we'll go to $1 million. You name the figure. I'll put the bet on with you.
My wife would kill me if I went more than $350.
All right. Well, $350 then. But if you lose, you owe me dinner as well at the French Laundry. Okay, $350. Let's do it.
That's more than $350.
But we have to stick to the hard sciences, chemistry.
Yep.
Physics.
Hard sciences. You get to pick the universities. They can't all be California, but they can't all be Republican universities. So you pick the universities. We will pick 10 scientific papers.
Shaquille,
Just so
we can get an understanding of what's going on with this bet and everything, I'm going to mention a study. It's actually a recent study, and it is actually something that you were just talking about, testosterone, and all along those lines. It was a study done earlier this year, and I'm going to read part of the study, but not all of it. And you tell me if, as I read part of this study, if it is politically motivated, so that
before you do, Mark, I'll just ask Nick. Can you please correct that, because it wasn't just 100,000. I was prepared to go to $1 million, but he turned me down and he offered 350.
Yeah, but just really quickly, this study on testosterone, this is what it says in the opening, and it is from Harvard. We all know that we love how much we love Harvard, but it says, what do you think of testosterone? What comes to mind? Macho man, aggressive, impatient type A behavior, road rage, violence. Testosterone's role in bad behavior is largely a myth. What's more, testosterone plays other important roles in health and diseases that may surprise you. For example, that you know that testosterone is a key player in prostate cancer, or that women need testosterone too. There's more to testosterone than guys behaving badly. Learn all about the sex hormone here, including its primary benefits. And then they go into some of these primary benefits, including development of the voice, the deepening of the voice, appearance of facial and hair, and sex drive, sperm production, and a number of other things. They even talk about ovarian function and bone strength with women, as well as sexual behavior, including libido. That was part of
so
the
this
study.
shouldn't turn into the.
That was part of the study. So my
Yeah,
question
all right,
is,
all right. Like this shouldn't turn into the testosterone hour, but I can tell you personally
to that study
that I am dealing with dropping levels of testosterone. I've lost muscle. I've lost rigidity of a particular part of my body. So, and I've worked in a bunch of places with people who were testosterone heavy, including steroid users and dealers. So yeah, I'm familiar with testosterone and what it can and can't do.
Right. And my only question to everybody on the panel, because it also talks about enlargement, prostate enlargement, dealing with difficulty urinating, liver disease, acne, fluid retention. And there are some people that might say that notion of the masculinity part of it would be politically motivated, but they actually said that that is counter to what their study was and all along those lines. So my question that I asked earlier was, from what I read, and I could go into more of it, does that sound like that have political overtones? Because that was my question.
Yes,
we know
yes, it does. It does, because if there was a precipitous drop in the observed rates of estrogen within the population, we would be concerned about it. Okay. Right. Now, I don't hate women. I'm not a chauvinistic pig. Okay. I might make some chauvinistic jokes, but most of the women that I know will laugh along with me because I'm being a dickhead. Okay. I love women, and women, although I'm single, women generally love me. Okay. We have to look at what are the changes in hormone levels across our own species and also across other species. If we are seeing changes look, if you want to go political with human beings, if we are seeing changes in animals, and we can also observe that there has been a precipitous drop in testosterone levels with those animals, Kimberly, I still love you, come back. If we can see those drops, shouldn't we be studying that? The fact that those studies have been proposed and have been knocked back for funding, why? Why should that be knocked back for funding? That sounds insane to me.
The study itself, I'm trying to understand y'all's bet. And so the people that are watching can understand the bet as well. I'm going to give you the bottom line, because that's what they said. The bottom line, this is their conclusion. And y'all tell me whether you would win the bet or whether Rick would win the bet, because the concluding remark is testosterone is so much more than its reputation would suggest. Men and women need the proper amount of testosterone to develop and function normally. However, the optimal amount of testosterone is far from clear. Check-in testosterone levels is as easy as having a blood test. The difficult part in interpreting the result levels may vary over the course of a day. It is best to measure the testosterone level in the morning, even with an abnormally low level that is replicated on a repeat test. The decision to begin testosterone replacement therapy and
Mark, we got the article. Mark, we got the article. We got the article. We got the article.
That was the bottom line.
Of course.
Is that a political statement? Is what I'm asking.
Of course.
You win.
Of course, Mark. Of course. Rick and I will collectively decide on what's political and what's not. But I will say to my Californian friend how heartless he is to actually allow me to sit here and break the Federal Wire Act or whatever ridiculous rules you have in the United States and in California to actually allow me to place a bet from another country. I just can imagine me trying to come into Washington State at the border and I get turned away because Rick Rosner agreed to take the bet. He should have said no, but for $350, I'll never be allowed into the US again. Terrible. Rick, where's the love, Rick? Where's the love?
I'm guilty of this. I make my online bets via some outfit out of Costa Rica. but so, all right, so everybody knows that universities are hotbeds of liberalism, but that doesn't automatically disqualify the work done at universities. And I went to a big state school, University of Colorado. Right now, it's probably got 30,000 students, and the vast majority of those students don't want politics to enter into their education at all, and are getting educated. I took, a bunch of math and science, but I also took some women's studies, but most people didn't. And most people could care less about a politically charged field of study like women's studies. The CU turns out a ton of scientists and engineers.
Hey,
Rick,
Bill,
that was a great little speech, but let's be honest here, okay? If I was like Donald Trump and set up the University of Shack, right? And the University of Shack was to teach people around the Western world how to get out from underneath the government, how to be free, have their assets in tax-free jurisdictions, and be able to earn whatever they wanted to earn. No matter how my studies may not be, that slanted, no matter how many leftists I employ at my university, everybody is going to look at the studies that I've conducted and say those studies are right-wing slanted. So to your point, that just because a university is left-wing slanted doesn't mean that their studies are not worth anything. Yeah, I would agree with you, other than the fact that if left-wing studies are funded and right-wing studies are not, if studies are funded purely on the basis of politics, there's a clear bias. And we know that publishing houses and major media outlets are preferencing one side versus the other. And the worst thing for someone like myself, especially when I look at the stuff that's going on in America, is I'm really not that political a person. I really don't take hard political positions. I try to listen to both sides. But I become politically homeless, and I feel like I'm being lied to when I only get to hear or see or read one side of the argument. Let me hear the other. I'm not an idiot. Let me hear the other side. I may not agree with the other side, but let me hear it. And when those studies aren't funded, it's slant science in one political direction.
But
Let's hear from Bill Danko, because,
Well, the comment was directed at Rick, so I'd like to have Rick respond to it, but Bill, you go first.
I got to say, regardless of politics, people have to learn how to code. They have to learn how to work with AI. They have to learn how to build rockets. They have to learn how to build the machinery that will address climate change. I mean, you can argue about the politics of climate change, but climate change will be a $1 trillion industry. And we need to, I want to educate the generation of people who are going to make a ton of money off of that stuff. And
Bill, I know you want to say something. If you don't mind, I just want to jump in. I'll just ask one quick question, Rick. I know that you respect me greatly, as I respect you greatly. So I'll ask you this one question: left wing, right wing, Democrats, Republicans, Liberal Party, Labor Party, or Labor Party, Tories in the UK, whatever. Right? Let me just ask you this one question: do you think that if you and I, without anybody else, just you and I, were in charge of the whole world's climate agenda, do you believe that you and I together would achieve more than the political apparatus that we have in the world today?
Well, certainly more than America's political apparatus, but yeah, because we would look at the science, we would look at, I believe in climate change, but I also believe that expecting people to change their behavior that will address climate change in any significant way is a ridiculous hope.
So if you and I were in charge, we would be trying to find ways where people didn't have to make dramatic changes. We'd be trying to find ways that are practical, that are economically viable, etc. The point that I'm making is we are entrusting, if it's true, and I don't fully agree with this, but if it's true that the world really is as imperiled as the climate change people say it is, why would you trust government people to solve this? Government people haven't been able to solve healthcare. They haven't been able to solve the environment. They haven't been able to solve taxes. They haven't been able to solve, the problems of the justice system. They've made a mess and a mockery out of everything. Why would you, if you really truly believed that the environment and climate change was this much of a calamitous threat to our very existence, the last people on earth that you would entrust that responsibility to would be politicians, surely. But to my main point, Rick, you and I could sit here with the other panelists. We could sit here for the next week or month and come up with better solutions than what these turkeys in politics are coming up with. And that is the major problem with the world today.
No, hold on a second, Rick.
Hold on. I want politicians to get out of the way. Technology is what's going to, like, you look at the Baltic countries, the Nordic countries, these little countries with 2 million people. The U.S. is a giant tanker ship that is tough to turn, especially when people on the bridge are fighting. It's little countries that can be scientifically nimble, that can embrace modernity. The U.S. right now can't.
Yeah, and made absolutely no difference on the international scheme of things. You want government to get out of the way? Awesome, brother. I love you. Welcome to the libertarian position that I have. I'm so glad to have you. But let me just give you a little dose of reality and practicality. You want government to get out of the way? I want Taylor Swift to come on a date with me. Neither is going to happen, my friend.
Well, I hate to say this, but he's already
hold
dating,
on. Last thing, then I'll shut up. The last thing is, all I want is a push for math and science, the same way we had starting after Russia put up Sputnik, the first satellite in orbit in 1957. The U.S. pooped its pants. We freaked out, and we decided we were going to push math and science, and we pushed it hard for 20 years. And that's the reason we live in the high-tech, paradise we live in now.
Hey,
Rick, do you really believe that the powers to be would want there to be an articulate and intelligent citizenry? Of course they wouldn't. So I agree with you. That's what we want, and we'd be better off for it. But they deliberately dumb us down. Bill Danko's written a book.
Yeah.
Now, I disagree with Bill and with David M. Walker on death taxes, and I will argue about that till I'm blue in the face. But I can tell you, I would have rather read his book when I was in year 7 than to have read the bullshit economic stuff that I read when I was in year 7. Okay? They don't want people like me to get access to information. They don't want a citizenry which is well-informed and rebellious. People who can actually call government out on both sides of politics when they do the wrong thing. That's not what they want. And have you ever, Rick, hang on, Mark, have you ever known an instance in history where they've actually wanted the major percentage of the population to be informed? Have you ever known that to exist?
Well, I grew up.
Hold on a second, Rick. Shaquille, along those same lines, I actually want to get Bill involved in the conversation as well, and I was actually going to ask him the question in this way and all along those lines. But Bill, one of the things that I've heard people complain about the education system way back when, including back in the 70s and definitely the 80s and 60s, is that we have been encouraging people to learn to go to work for corporate America and not necessarily to try to do what Shaquille has done a very good job of, which is being a self-made man and an entrepreneur and all along those lines. So do you feel, Bill, that is a legitimate argument? Because I've heard a lot of people that say that we are literally training folks to go to work for the corporations and not to try to come up with more ways of being financially free, which I know is something that Nick talks about a lot, is financial freedom and financial literacy. But I'm just wondering, is that a fear that you have as well? Because I hear a lot of people are going like, yeah, my kids are going to school and they're going to go work for, I'll just throw out a company, Glaxo, and they'll be working at Glaxo for all those many years and everything, but they won't necessarily be doing anything but getting into the corporate culture. But your thoughts, Bill?
No, there's some truth in that. I mean, in terms of a vocation. But one of the things that has been happening in the university system, certainly in the United States, is we've gotten away from the idea of free discourse and having opposing views and having a discussion. We have these safe spaces and have with these trigger words. I mean, it is absolutely a sham when you look at some of the teaching methods that ignore, as Shaq rightly points out, we have to hear the opposing arguments. But sometimes there's too much of a sensitivity among the students and the professors to have any kind of discussion. So the university system has contributed to the problem, that's for sure, in terms of lack of critical thinking and preparing students for, a career or multiple jobs in their career, right?
Yeah.
So, look, one of the things that I really like seeing in the United States right now is, I like this guy, Mike Rowe, who does the Dirty Jobs programs. There is so much, when I talk to some of my contractor friends who are getting to be my age, and I'm asking them about their succession plan, they said, there is no succession plan. I can't get anybody who wants to get dirty like I did in my younger years. So, I mean, we have some real disconnects in our society, that's for sure. I mean, who's going to do your finished carpentry? Who's going to do your competent drywalling if we don't have some skill? Or the pipe fitting, getting down and dirty is something where money can be made and there are legitimate careers, and the university isn't going to address those issues. But the university is falling down. They're not encouraging free discourse, and there's not enough trade schools. All right. These are some of the fundamental problems that we face right now in education.
Can I respond to a couple of things that Bill said there? Firstly,
Go for it.
Bill has a PhD. He's written a couple of books that I've bought. We've got David M. Walker, very knowledgeable person, former Comptroller General of the United States. I disagree with them about the death taxes. I was going to back down. Now, okay, I was a bit animated at the time, and I was in Dubai, and I just came from an anti-tax conference, so I was a bit more animated. But I wasn't going to back down. Neither would I now. They're free to disagree with me. I'm free to disagree with them. I respect them both greatly. I respect their positions and their opinions on things. I just happen to disagree with them. We should be able to do that. We shouldn't have a situation where kids are going to universities or high school and they're afraid that if they say something their teacher doesn't agree with, they're going to be marked down or they're going to be marked wrong. The other thing I just want to very quickly say was what Bill just said then about trade schools. Look, there's a lot of kids that don't like academics. They might be really bright kids, but they just don't like academics. Why shouldn't they go into trades? But the more important point, actually, of what Bill just said was how many kids or young people don't want to do the hard yards. Now, I'm not trying to tell you that I've had it hard in life. I'm not going to try and say that whatever money I've made has been as difficult for me to make physically as, like, I don't know, being a brickies labourer. Like, hell no. Like, there's no way that what I've done has ever been as hard as that. Okay, I did actually start off in a trade, by the way. We won't go into that. But I've never done that kind of laborious work, nor would I claim to. But I see a lot of young people that come into finance, oh, I want to be just like you. And I say, okay, that's fine. A lot of the time, it's fairly easy. But when the shit hits the fan, like it did in September 11, I was a bit too young for it, so I wasn't quite on the trade desk. I was partially because I was a trainee. But in 2008, 2007-8, there were weeks where I didn't even go home, where I was taking caffeine tablets, and we'd fall asleep at our desks, and like the phone would ring, we'd answer it, we're like, oh, and we're trying to like keep our brains together to try to put on trades because we had people's retirement savings and stuff on the line. It was hard, and this went on for weeks. I remember my girlfriend at the time bringing suits into work for me, and there was no showers at that time unless you went downstairs all the way down to like the gym room. We didn't have time to do that. So I was getting like wet wipes and just wiping myself down and changing my suit, and then like being in like some dirty old shirt and all this sort of stuff. And I did that for weeks. You know, you'd start because of Australian time. So you'd start on a Monday morning. You'd finish about 6 a.m. on a Saturday morning because we had to wait for New York to close. And then you'd come home and you'd just crash the whole weekend and then start again. And sometimes we'd have a Sunday meeting to work out what we thought was going to happen in New Zealand for the next day. So please show me those people that have that sort of dedication. And even in more recent times, there are times I do 20 hours a day. There are times that I'll stay up for 70 or 80 hours at a time because something calamitous has happened in the markets. So it's not easy. It's not just a walk in the park, but people don't teach that. People say, oh, you can have it all. You can just work 9 to 5. You can have 4 kids. You can have a loving partner. Bullshit. You can't do that. There's always a sacrifice in life. And why we're teaching kids they can have it all without any effort is ridiculous. You know, about 70, 80 hours. Try doing 100 or 120 hours. And then spend the whole weekend catching up on the financial news that you might have missed out on the Bloomberg terminal.
Most entrepreneurs work 120 to 140 hours, 160 from my understanding with entrepreneurs that I know and all along those lines. So definitely
it's the only common thread I see for the millionaire next door is they commonly work 70 to 80 hour weeks, you know? And I don't know if you put that in your book, Bill, but at least my empirical analysis when I talk to these people or by my clients, this would be like a common thread. They would, whatever the 40-hour work week was, they doubled it. And the reason they got paid more, they said, well, I work twice as much as my employees.
People ask me recently, because I don't wear my gold watch that often, I'll wear this one. I do still wear my gold watch, but I normally wear this watch, which is a Garmin, and I'll wear this thing called a Whoop. And I said, well, what's going on with that? Why are you doing that? So I've got a former military person who's the Australian equivalent of like a Marine or something like that. And he monitors what I'm doing and tells me to exercise, and I never do them, but he tells me to exercise stuff. And he's a very good friend of mine. He rang me one day and he said, Shaq, what the hell's wrong with you? What are you doing? I said, what do you mean what I'm doing? He goes, you know that I can tell when you're sleeping, when you're not, right? He said, you had, from Monday to Saturday, you had 4 hours sleep and you didn't even get those 4 hours in one hit. You got 15 minutes here, you got 20 minutes there. You can't do that. You'll put yourself into an early grave. And so when we had that sleep doctor on a few weeks ago, and I said,
so I don't know how you make people less fancy. I can't imagine any of the generations after the greatest generation fighting World War II. Like for most of the 40s, 50s, 60s, every able-bodied American male had to give 2 years to the military. There's no way that people would put up with stuff now. You look at China. China is eating the world's lunch, but they're a dictatorship. They tell their people, you know, where to live, how to work, where to work. So I don't know. It's tough. How do you make, you know, a more sensitive generation into, you know, educated, you know, nose to the grindstone people?
It just really quickly, because I saw Sasha was back with us and everything, and we've been talking about the education issue. And just Sasha, really quickly, how much of the education in Canada is part of the budget and all along those lines? Because I know that on the economic show we talk about different aspects, and you're there in Canada, and you also have an understanding of Ukraine, your home country, before you got involved in this horrible war and all along this line. But definitely, how much of the education conversation comes up in even the politics of Canada? Because I know that education becomes a major issue, both politically and economically here in the States, and I would imagine around the West, but I'm not as familiar with Canada as I should be, even though I have a cousin that lives up there and is involved in the Native American culture and all along those lines. But how important is education in the overall conversation of Canadian economics?
It is important, but in Canada, federal government is not involved in education, period. It's all responsibility of provincial governments and the local governments that support. There's a variety of schools, including public schools, private schools, religious schools, and just name it. And there is such a diversity. They have national schools. I mean, it's not national. It should be some kind of schools. For example, for German kids or from Jewish kids or some. It's national schools. I don't know how you call them really, but you can select one of those schools, and they are under jurisdiction of provincial governments, and they're being regulated by such. So it's quite diverse. But again, it all depends on how good the teachers are. So you have a lot of schools, and you have a choice. Except in public schools, you must go to school which is closest to the district where you live. So you don't have so much flexibility on public schools. But in private schools, you can select and you can choose any school you want, provided that you are happy with curriculum, teachers, and the level of education that you get there. The colleges are very vibrant. Again, they're community colleges, or colleges which are part of a higher education system. And, so it's very, very diverse, and you have to go really from province to province, or even from city to city, find out what you're looking at, how to evaluate it, and whether you want to enroll, or your children or grandchildren, or whatever you might have. So it's not easy thing to discuss, actually.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Hey, Bill, just really quickly, because Rick kind of alluded to it earlier, the whole notion of technology and the access of technology. So as a school professor, do you feel that our students are getting enough of the technology? Because I do kind of agree with Rick that we need to make sure that the kids that are going to college have access to what they need in order for this critical thinking and critical discourse to take place. And I do know that there are various ways that they, even if they don't have their own laptops, that they can have access to the laptops and computers to get to Google and everything else. But I was just wondering your thoughts around technology and its role in education and economics.
Yeah, I mean, technology is here. We must embrace it. Even the AI. I can't predict the future, but I can tell you this: exposing students to more and more things that are current is probably in their best interest. Not everybody's going to be a computer programmer or get involved with AI. But the point is, it has to be part of the curriculum.
There's a corrosive argument that comes mostly from the right that education is elitist. I think we need to, and it's part of the argument against forgiving student loans, that if you let somebody who's got $100,000 in student debt, if you forgive 20 grand of that debt, that you're just throwing money at elitists. And what about, lunch pail Joe, who doesn't have that debt? Education should be thought of as, especially now with things changing so fast, it should be thought of as an ongoing process throughout your life and not elitist.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of not elitist, this is something that I want to bring up, Bill, again. I don't know if I brought up on this show. I've been bringing up prior shows. But I think this is a very important document and for our education system to cover it. But after going through a lot of education and looking at education, no one ever covers this particular document. It's called the Budget of the United States Government. And the thing is, the reason why this is an important document, it represents 25% of our gross domestic product. And this is everything that the government spends money on. Yet, I went to 10 years of college, got a BA, MBA, JD, LLM. I even taught at Northeastern University, taught at Campbell Law School, and went through a lot of curriculum to see if anybody ever covered this in any course in the United States.
Hey, Nick, I hear what you're saying. Nick, I hear what you're saying, and I agree with you. But I got a quick question. I got a quick question for you that answers maybe my thoughts around it. I do think the budget is important. I think we got to deal with the budget and have an understanding of the budget and all along those lines. But there is another document, and I have a pocket version of it. I wish Shaquille was here so that he could see, because this is just a pocket version, and it's giving fascinating facts about it and all along those lines. But I would ask you that, how many people, and I don't have any kids, but I do have my 2 nephews, how many people have actually seen this as well and all along those lines? Because you will look, that is a copy of the U.S. Constitution and interesting facts about it. Well, and I would argue that is also not taught enough.
I can tell you they actually cover constitutional law in the Constitution. I learned it in my political science class at University of South Florida. They had it in law school, obviously. So the Constitution was covered. And frankly, at law school, they actually had very good teachers under constitutional law. And you can actually read quite a bit about it. Okay, that being said, the Constitution doesn't represent 25% of everything we spend. This document does. And it seems to me only the elitists read it. The first part is basically, I'm 43 pages into it, is a sales job. It's the sales job. I call it a sales job. It's basically the president's gurus telling you why it's a good idea to spend all this money and why we're spending $5 trillion and we're only taking in like $4 trillion.
Does it explain the pork? Because I guarantee you that in that budget is tons of pork and all along those lines. So
the meat. Okay, finally, after you go through, I'm on page 60. Finally, you get to the meat of exactly what you're spending money on, starting with the Department of Agriculture. And you find out the Department of Agriculture isn't just spending money on agriculture. They're spending money on strong nutrition safety nets, building a supply chain. By the way, some of these things are important, but then as you go through them, some of them are just pork jobs in the billions and billions of dollars. And I'll give you one example. Okay. One example, they're spending $3 billion to educate people on LGBTQ rights. All right. $3 billion, that's basically wasted. And the reason why it's wasted, if I told Sasha, we're going to give the chess community $3 billion to have kids learn how to play chess, what would that do to the chess community?
I would ask for 6.
6 billion. Okay, but it doesn't matter, Sasha. It's a huge amount of money. And the thing is, then you have kids playing chess, there'd be tournaments, blah, 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 blah. But not one dime is devoted.
Nick, hold on a second. Nick, you say it's hold on a second. You say it's wasted. You say it's wasted, but that group, and Rick can talk to this as well, but that group has definitely suffered a lot in their mental health, and a lot of that, and part of that money is probably to go around studies and efforts to help that community as well.
The chess players have suffered a lot. I mean, the thing is, this is what I'm saying about the crying liberal, and I'm a Democrat. This is, to me, is crying liberal trash.
But I don't know the exact figures, but the figures are very high in that community, particularly around certain parts of that community and everything. And I think that they have as much right as anybody else to be represented and to have their voices heard. That's just my opinion. I will definitely say that I am probably one of the more liberal folks here.
I agree. You go ahead and send them a check. Okay.
My wife has worked at a couple.
Money and our money. Okay?
My wife has worked at a couple liberal Los Angeles high schools, and those schools have a lot of kids struggling with gender issues and are a little miserable. But you know what? I and my friends struggled with virginity issues in high school.
So we should give you $3 billion?
No, we should. It's a distraction that no matter even if a kid is struggling with gender issues, that kid still wants to be freaking educated and be prepared to be a productive adult. Maybe the kid doesn't realize it because the kid is all sad because, I was sad all through high school because girls didn't like me, but I still needed to be educated. We need to look at it like what you just put up here with the budget. The discussion needs to be about how to educate modern kids with the same kind of dialogue we had in the 60s when Sputnik made us re-examine how we were teaching people.
Rick, I would like to remind you that 100, 200 years ago, European nobility would send their sons to Brussels to get sex education and experience at the same time. And that worked wonderfully. They were feeling really a man from that point on, and they enjoyed themselves, and that is, in my opinion, a proper education.
Well, yeah, there are solutions that don't cost money. Realize the American government is broke. You got to start with a proposition, 30 trillion in the hole going 2 trillion in the hole. Then you start looking at this in a different light. Okay, connects more rural Americans to high-speed internet, $2 billion. That's $2 billion of taxpayer money that we're borrowing from your grandchildren to pay so that somebody in rural America gets high-speed internet connection. Too bad. If they want it, they can pay for it. But this is what this is what the Republicans need to go over. This is what the media needs to go over. The budget. Don't close the government down. That's ridiculous. Instead, what you want to do is go through each one of these points and look at them. It's 171 pages, 60 pages of sales job, but 100 pages of meat that needs to be discussed, and see whether or not do we really need to spend $2 billion. So if I'm a farmer in Podunk, North Carolina or Kansas, I get high-speed internet. No, you don't.
No,
If you
hold on
want
a second. I'm sure that in that budget is also money. If you look at that agriculture side of that budget, I'm sure that there is also. I'm going to name two organizations that are very popular, and I'm sure that there is also money in there for the Boy Scouts and for 4-H. Now, if I'm hearing you correctly,
I
Boy
wouldn't give
Scouts
them a
and
dime
4-H
either.
don't need funding because I'm
I
hearing you correctly.
wouldn't
They
give
don't
the
need
Boy
funding.
Scouts and 4-H. I haven't got to them. I would not give them a bloody dime. And I was a member of the Boy Scouts, not one bloody dime. Are you kidding me? And neither 4-H. Remember,
There are parts of
your government
society
is
that
broke.
agriculture, even though we need
You
food
got to
to
start with your
survive,
job.
you would not give any money
Go ahead
to
and set up a check.
Boy
To-
Scouts
to
or
me,
the 4-H.
to-
I hear you
Our
correctly.
money don't go here.
To me,
there goes-
$2 billion for rural internet seems like a great deal. For $6 for every
No,
American
It's
man, woman, or child,
actually
we get to
over
connect
55.
everybody.
Rick,
My
it's,
point,
it's
exactly.
actually 40 billion over a period of time. It's 50,000 per household. So if Rick, you decide I want to move to Mesquite, Arizona, you're asking the government to spend 50,000 to connect you, so you have high-speed internet line for your
Or
convenience.
maybe we
It
take
is a
some of
waste.
that money and figure out how to make it cheaper to get people high-speed internet instead of.
But it's not the
spending
government's
$50,000.
job to give high-speed internet. This is not the American
It's not-
government's job.
It's not
This
the
is
government's
private-
job.
If
It's
Google
not the
wants-
government's job to do anything. It's not the government's job to do anything. And while I'm back, before my battery dies, I want to finish off what I was saying before. These sleep doctors are trying to tell me that I need more sleep. Okay? Who the hell has time to sleep 8 hours a day or 6 hours or 4 hours a day? Get a bloody job. And if you're sleeping 8 hours a day, you need to get a second job.
Okay, may I ask you
I don't
something?
need a job.
Don't you think in
That's where you
today's
have your money working for you. Hello? If your money works for you, you don't need to work.
I would
Remember
like
that.
to ask
My money works harder for me, Nick, than it does for you. That's why I drive a Bentley and you live on a bloody golf course.
I would like to ask you something. Don't
Hold
you
on a second.
believe
Let's ask the
that
question.
in today's society, in the United States, the internet is just as essential as the water and all utilities that government should
Write them a check. Write
land.
your Canadian friends a check, but
If
don't
it's
ask the
service
government.
land, you must have access to
Good.
all necessity.
Good. Then you
Electricity,
pay for it.
water, and internet today. It's not what was 40 years ago. Today,
That's
it's a
the reason I live in a
must-have
city.
thing. It's not something that, oh, you may have internet or you may not have internet. You must have access to internet one way or another.
Good. That's the reason you live in Toronto.
Sasha, two-thirds of the world doesn't have access to internet, and also two-thirds of the world don't have access to clean drinking water. And I'm sure if you go and ask them, they prefer the water over the internet.
Wants to be a third world country, then should crash all the internet, don't provide internet, don't build anything, and you will be in a couple of years a
It's
third
not.
world country.
Hey, listen.
Well, Sasha, if the half-baked socialists up in Canada can't work out how to provide internet to all the Canadians, and the half-baked socialists in the Democrat Party in America can't work out how to provide internet, what do you want the rest of us to do? We pay our taxes. You guys figure it out.
No,
Hey,
in Canada
Shaquille,
is
hold on a
this.
second.
This
It's almost
is a
time to end the
service
show and
plan
everything.
that somebody is buying. He is buying access to electricity, water, and internet. It must be
No,
part of
no,
the service
No, Sasha.
plan.
No,
There's
Sasha.
no
He's not.
life
He's
today
not buying
without
access to it.
internet. Don't you understand that?
Sasha, he's not buying access to it. He's forcing me to buy him access to it.
It doesn't
That's
matter.
what's really
Do
going on.
something else.
Hold on, 'cause
Okay,
we gotta end
so
it,
water
everything.
necessity.
No, 'cause we
Yes,
gotta
water
end it
is
all around those
necessity. Yes,
No.
electricity is necessity. Yes, it is. So is internet today, 2023. It's necessity. You cannot tell.
Good.
Oh, you people have internet. Oh, you people, no. You're not going to have internet.
Hey, let me tell you, Sasha. Let me tell you, if you drop me off in any place in the United States with no money, no electricity, and just a shirt on my back, I guarantee you, in a country as amazing as America, with absolutely nothing behind me, I'll find a way. Within a couple of years, I'll own my own house, I'll have a successful business, and I'll be on top. And I don't need electricity, I don't need anything but access to a library, and I will go and knock on somebody's door until they give me a job, and I'll find one. So don't tell me that we need electricity and this and that. No, what people need to have is a little bit of self-respect.
Shakil, I agree. You may find a piece of land without any services and build on your own one way or another, whatever. I have no problem with that. But if government gives you a serviced land for which it takes taxes, for which it must service that land, and electricity, water, and internet is must for this land to be.
Sasha, I don't want a government that will by force steal the labor and the production of labor of others in order to give me something. I'll sort myself out because I've got enough self-pride not to demand things from other people.
Okay, you agree that it's fine because the government will provide electricity, water, but no internet. Why not?
Yes,
internet?
the government should be providing water or electricity either. The government should have nothing to do with this.
Okay, as I said before, then it makes the land is not serviceable. There is a land.
Really? Sasha, tell me.
No problem.
So what's going on in what is it where Michael Moore's from in Detroit, Michigan, in Flint, Michigan? The government provided water up there. How'd that work out?
David M. Walker.
How'd that work out? You know what?